Hey there. Welcome back. We're diving into some pretty interesting stuff today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at these later stages of adult development,
Okay.
specifically stages 5.0 and 5.5, according to Terri O'Fallon's stages model.
Right.
And we're going to be using a couple of Kiersey Makinen articles that really dig into like what it actually means to get to these levels of awareness.
Well, it's kind of like
It's pretty wild stuff.
yeah, it's like discovering there's this whole other dimension to life that you never even knew existed before.
Right. Yeah. So like before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's
Yeah.
start with like what actually happens when someone enters stage 5.0.
Okay.
The article uses this term meta-aware, which I have to admit sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah, meta-aware might sound like something out of a sci-fi movie,
Yeah.
but it's a very real shift in consciousness.
Okay.
And I think the easiest way to understand it is to imagine you're watching a movie. So at stage 4.5, you're completely engrossed in the story.
Right.
You're identifying with the characters and their emotions.
Yeah.
But at stage 5.0, you suddenly become aware that you're the one watching the movie. It's like you're no longer lost in the narrative.
Okay.
You're aware of yourself as the observer.
So it's like this meta-awareness.
Exactly.
It's this realization that you're not just your thoughts and your emotions,
Yeah.
but the awareness itself.
Right. You're the sky, not just the clouds passing through.
Oh, that's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
But the articles mention that this transition,
Yeah.
it's not always like smooth sailing.
Right.
It sounds like there's a lot of questioning and confusion
Oh, yeah.
during this phase.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like their whole world is turned upside down.
Absolutely. Imagine you've been wearing rose-colored glasses your entire life.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're gone.
Whoa.
Everything looks different and you don't even know it's real anymore.
Yeah.
And so people at this stage, they start questioning everything. Their jobs, their relationships, even their own identities.
Makes sense.
It's a very natural response to this deconstruction of their previous reality.
Yeah. The article even talks about people making these big external changes,
Right.
like quitting your jobs or moving to a new city,
Yeah.
hoping to somehow fix this inner turmoil.
Like they can escape it.
Yeah. Is that really the solution though?
Not at all.
Okay.
Because the real shift happening at 5.0, it's internal, not
Okay.
external. You can't escape this stage by just changing your circumstances.
Got it.
It's about fundamentally changing how you relate to your own experience.
So if external changes aren't the answer, how do people actually navigate this?
Yeah.
This intense period of questioning and deconstruction?
That's where things get really interesting.
Oh.
We start to see a major rewiring of how people think and communicate.
Rewiring. So does that mean like their brains are literally changing?
Well, not literally rewiring, but there are significant shifts in their cognitive patterns. It's like they're learning a whole new language, but they're still stumbling over the words.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
The articles mention things like blurting out thoughts,
Yeah.
interrupting themselves mid-sentence,
Yeah.
or even freezing up completely while they're talking.
I can see how that would be so frustrating
Oh, yeah.
for the person experiencing it and for anyone trying to have a conversation with them.
Totally.
Yeah. It's almost like their internal processing speed is outpacing their ability to actually like articulate those thoughts.
It is, and here's the thing. Those communication glitches,
Yeah.
they could be easily mistaken for a psychological issue
Oh, really?
if someone doesn't understand the developmental process that's happening.
Right.
And this is why it's so crucial to have a framework like the stages model
Yeah.
to help make sense of these seemingly unusual behaviors.
I'm thinking about that, saying if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree,
Exactly.
it will live its whole life believing it's stupid.
Right?
We need to understand like the context of someone's development before we can really understand their actions.
Exactly. And since very few people reach this stage,
Oh.
those who do can feel incredibly isolated.
Right.
Imagine trying to explain a vivid dream to someone who has never dreamed before.
Oh, yeah,
They might not get it, and that can be a very lonely experience.
for sure. And that sense of isolation must be like amplified
Oh, yeah.
by the fact that, as you mentioned, they're essentially learning a whole new language.
It is.
The article talks about how at 5.0 words and concepts
Yeah,
start to feel empty and flimsy.
right.
It's like the very foundation of how we communicate is suddenly shaky.
Yeah, they're starting to grasp the constructed nature of reality.
Wow.
Things they once took for granted, words, social structures, even their own identity.
Wow.
They start to feel more like these temporary agreements rather than absolute truths.
Interesting.
It's like realizing the map is not the territory.
So we've got this deconstruction of reality happening, this questioning of like, everything they thought they knew.
Yeah, right.
But it sounds like there's also this simultaneous experience of fullness.
Yes.
That the article mentioned.
Absolutely. It's a real paradox.
Okay.
At first, there's this incredible sense of fullness.
Okay.
A deep integration of mind, body, and spirit. It's like all the pieces finally click into place and they feel this sense of wholeness they've never experienced before.
So there's this incredible sense of wholeness and integration.
Yeah.
But then they also start to realize that the very foundation of that wholeness,
right,
their beliefs, their identity, their perception of reality is actually a construct.
Exactly. It's like they've climbed to the top of a mountain,
Yeah,
feeling exhilarated by the view.
okay.
And then they realize the mountain itself is made of sand.
Whoa.
That's where the feeling of emptiness kicks in.
That's such a powerful image, like you're feeling totally whole and complete.
Yeah.
But then you realize that that wholeness is built on a foundation that might not be as solid as you once thought.
Right.
I can only imagine that would lead to some serious existential angst.
It does for a lot of people, but you know what?
What's that?
That emptiness also holds the seed of incredible freedom.
Okay.
Because if everything is a construct, then you're not bound by the limitations of those constructs anymore.
Right.
You can start to question everything and rebuild your reality based on a much deeper understanding of yourself and the world.
So by the end of 5.0, they've deconstructed their old reality.
Yeah.
But they haven't quite figured out how to rebuild it yet.
Right.
It's like they're standing on the edge of a precipice, looking out at this vast, unknown landscape.
That's a great way to put it.
What happens next? Where do they go from here?
Well, that is where we enter the fascinating and often bewildering world of stage 5.5.
Buckle up.
Buckle up, because things are about to get even more interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Welcome back to our deep dive into the later stages of the stages model.
Oh, yeah. Last time we left off with this image of someone at the end of stage 5.0, standing on a precipice, having deconstructed their old reality, and facing this vast unknown landscape.
Right.
What happens when they take that leap into stage 5.5?
That's a great question.
It's both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
It is.
It's like they finally let go of the old map, but they haven't quite figured out how to navigate without it.
That's a great way to put it. And what's so fascinating about stage 5.5 is it's called the mind's eye in the model.
Okay.
These individuals become incredibly creative.
Oh, wow.
They don't just passively accept this deconstructed reality.
Right.
They actively start to rebuild it. Imagine someone who spent their whole life thinking the world was flat.
Right.
And then they discover it's round.
Okay.
At 5.5, people are building entirely new globes.
Interesting.
Based on this expanded awareness.
So they're not just questioning everything anymore. They're actually building something new.
Exactly.
To take its place.
Yeah.
That's kind of exciting.
It is. And the energy at this stage is palpable.
Yeah.
You know, Makinen's article has described this incredible burst of creative energy where people are drawing on this vast array of knowledge and experience to create these new paradigms and systems of understanding.
Yeah.
You know, they might be integrating insights from science, philosophy, art, spirituality.
Wow.
You name it.
So it's not just rearranging the furniture.
No.
We're talking about designing a whole new house, maybe even a whole new city.
Exactly. And the article highlights how these creations often emerge from a deep understanding of interconnectedness.
Right.
These individuals aren't just thinking about their own little corner of the world.
Yeah.
They're seeing the bigger picture, the web of relationships that connects everything.
But as exciting as all that sounds, the article also mentions some unique and potentially challenging thinking patterns that emerge at this stage.
Yes.
Like this thing called either thinking.
Okay.
Could you unpack that for us a bit? It sounds kind of restrictive.
Well, it can feel that way both for the individual experiencing it and for the people around them.
Okay.
With either thinking, you can see both sides of a paradox, but you can only really hold one side in your mind at any given time. Imagine a coin with heads representing one perspective and tails representing the other.
Okay.
Both sides are valid, but you can only focus on one at a time.
So it's like they're constantly flipping that coin back and forth, seeing both sides, but never quite being able to hold them together simultaneously.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be frustrating, always feeling like you have to choose one perspective over the other.
It can be, and it can make it challenging to hold space for nuance or ambiguity.
Right.
But it's important to remember this is just one aspect of their cognitive process.
Here.
It doesn't necessarily define them as a person.
The other thinking pattern that kind of stuck out to me was this one-way seeing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even sure what that means.
Okay, so picture a one-way mirror. You can see through it clearly, but the people on the other side can't see you.
Yeah.
With one-way seeing, individuals can see other people's perspectives with incredible clarity. But they don't always realize that those other people can see them just as clearly.
Oh.
It's like they're always observing, but never quite feeling seen themselves.
So even though they're building these amazing new paradigms and systems, they might still feel a sense of isolation.
Yes, and it's this weird paradox.
Oh.
They're deeply connected to the world on an intellectual and creative level, but they can struggle to feel that same connection in their interpersonal relationships.
Okay. I think I'm starting to understand this a bit better.
Good.
So we've got these folks at stage 5.5, full of creative energy, building these new worlds.
Yeah.
But they might also be struggling with these unique thinking patterns that can make it difficult to connect with others.
Yes.
How does all of this actually play out in their relationships?
Well, the article talks about this preference for what they call parallel play.
Wait, like kids in a sandbox building their own castles, but not really interacting.
Exactly. They love collaborating and bouncing ideas off of others.
Okay.
But when it comes to the actual creation process, they often prefer to work alone.
Makes sense. They're building these elaborate internal worlds.
Yeah.
And it might be hard to translate that into a shared language.
It can be.
And I imagine they're also pretty attached to their own ideas.
Oh, yeah.
It must be hard to receive feedback when you're so deeply invested in your creation.
Absolutely. The article mentions this tendency towards agreeing to disagree.
Okay.
It's not that they're being stubborn or closed-minded.
Right.
It's more that they've got this incredibly strong internal compass that guides their thinking.
So feedback might feel like a challenge to that internal compass.
It can.
Even if it's well-intentioned.
Yes, and here's another interesting pattern the article highlights.
Okay.
This cause and effect universalization.
Okay.
They're so good at seeing patterns and connections.
Yeah. That they sometimes apply those patterns, universally believing their insights to be absolute truth.
Okay. Now that sounds like it could lead to some conflict.
It can, especially if they're not open to the possibility that other perspectives might be equally valid.
Right.
It's like they've climbed to the top of a mountain and are trying to convince everyone else that their view is the only correct one.
So they might come across as a bit, well, know-it-all-ish.
You know it's not intentional.
Right.
Remember, they're deeply passionate about their insights.
Yeah.
And they want to share them with the world.
Sure.
The article describes this as a creative passion phase, a time of intense activity and this burning desire to share their discoveries.
It makes sense. They've had these profound realizations and they want to help others see the world in this new way.
Exactly.
But it can also be a lonely phase, right?
It can.
Like they're speaking a language that others don't quite understand.
Exactly. It's like they've stumbled upon this hidden treasure chest.
Full of amazing jewels, and they're trying to show everyone the beauty they've found.
Yeah.
But no one seems to get it.
Right.
It can be incredibly frustrating.
And what happens when that frustration sets in? Do they just give up?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
What often happens is they move into the final phase of 5.5, which is marked by this profound realization about the nature of their own creations.
Tell me more about this final phase of 5.5.
Well, you see, after all that effort, all that passion, all that striving to create something new and meaningful, they come to this surprising realization.
And what's that?
They realize that even their most brilliant creations, the ones they poured their heart and soul into, are ultimately empty in the grand scheme of things.
Empty? Wait, but how can that be? After all that work, all that passion? I have to admit that sounds a bit depressing.
I understand why you might think that.
Yeah.
But it's not actually depressing at all. In fact, it's incredibly liberating.
I'm not sure I follow. How can emptiness be liberating?
Imagine spending years building this intricate sandcastle, meticulously crafting every detail. Then as the tide comes in, you watch it wash away without resistance. And you realize that the beauty wasn't in the permanence of the structure, but in the creative act itself.
So it's about letting go of attachment to the outcome, to the permanence of things.
Precisely. And when you let go of that attachment, something amazing happens.
What's that?
You experience this profound peace, a sense of acceptance and effortless action.
That sounds pretty incredible. But does it mean that they stop creating altogether?
Not at all. It's not about stopping creation.
Okay.
It's about changing your relationship to it.
So they're still building new worlds, but without the same level of attachment
Exactly.
to how those worlds turn out.
It's a shift from striving to surrendering, from effort to flow.
Okay.
And this shift marks the very end of 5.5, the bridge to something even more expansive, even more mysterious.
Okay, now you've really got my attention. You're talking about stage 6.0, right?
Right.
The universal mind.
That's right. Stage 6.0 is where things get truly transcendent.
All right.
Where the individual self begins to dissolve into something much larger, much more interconnected.
Wow, I can't wait to dive into that.
I know, it's fascinating stuff.
Well, we're out of time for this segment.
Okay.
Guess we'll have to leave our listeners hanging just a little bit longer.
Consider it a cliffhanger.
Right.
We'll delve into the mysteries of the universal mind when we return.
All right, so we're back and ready to, explore this final frontier, stage 6.0, the universal mind. After that cliffhanger, I'm practically bursting with curiosity.
Well, get ready for a truly mind-bending journey because 6.0 takes us beyond the individual self.
Okay.
And into the realm of collective consciousness.
So if 5.0 was about deconstructing reality and 5.5 was about consciously rebuilding it, what happens at 6.0? Does the whole construction project get scrapped?
Not scrapped exactly. It's more like the architect realizes that they're not separate from the building.
Oh.
The individual I starts to merge with this universal awareness.
Okay.
A kind of cosmic consciousness that permeates everything.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get a glimpse of what you're talking about, but it's still pretty abstract.
It is.
Could you maybe give us a metaphor or an image to help us grasp this concept of the universal mind?
Sure. Imagine a single drop of water falling into the ocean.
Okay.
At first, it retains its individual form, its separate identity.
Yeah.
But as it merges with the vastness of the ocean, it becomes part of something much larger, much more expansive.
Right.
It's still water, but it's no longer limited by its previous form.
So it's like the individual self dissolving into a larger whole, but not disappearing entirely.
Exactly. It's not about annihilation of the self,
but
rather a transcendence of its limitations.
Okay.
And those concepts of timelessness and boundlessness that start to emerge at 5.5,
right,
they become fully integrated at 6.0.
I'm trying to wrap my head around what that would even feel like. Is there even a sense of self at that point?
It's not that the self disappears entirely.
Right.
It's more that it expands to encompass everything. Imagine the feeling of being deeply connected to nature, but amplified to an infinite degree.
Wow.
You're not just part of the web of life, you are the web of life.
That's a powerful image. It makes me think of that quote by the poet Rumi, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop."
That's a perfect expression of the 6.0 experience.
Yeah.
It's this profound shift in perspective, a recognition that we're all interconnected.
Right.
All part of this vast flowing tapestry of existence.
And this stage, it makes all the struggles and challenges of the previous stages seem almost insignificant, doesn't it?
In a way, yes. From the perspective of 6.0, the deconstruction and reconstruction of reality that happens at 5.0 and 5.5 can be seen as these necessary steps in the journey towards this ultimate integration.
So what does all this mean for us, for our listeners who are on their own developmental journeys? Do we all need to strive to reach 6.0?
I don't think it's about striving for a specific stage.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding that there's always more to discover, always another level of awareness to unfold.
So even if we never reach the heights of 6.0, understanding these stages can help us navigate our own experiences.
Absolutely.
With more grace and compassion.
It can, recognizing that others might be operating from a different stage of development, can help us communicate more effectively.
Right.
Build more meaningful relationships, and maybe even have a little more patience for ourselves when we're going through our own periods of growth and transformation.
It's like having a map that shows us not only where we are, but also where we might be headed.
Right.
And maybe even some alternate routes to get there.
And just having that map can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
It can help us understand that the challenges we face aren't personal failings.
Right.
But rather these natural parts of the developmental process.
So maybe instead of asking what's wrong with me, we can start asking what stage am I in? What's the next step on my journey?
Exactly. And who knows, maybe this deep dive has planted a seed that will blossom into a whole new level of awareness for you.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. So to our listeners, if you're feeling inspired to explore these stages further, we encourage you to check out the source material, those articles by Kirsi Makinen. And remember, the journey of self-discovery is ongoing. There's always more to learn, more to experience, and more to become. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep asking those big questions.